12 Worst and Unethical Scientific Experiments in Human History. You won't believe the terrible experiments that have been carried out in the name of science. In this video, you'll learn about the 12 worst and most notorious human scientific experiments, and discover the shocking truths behind these unethical research projects. 1. The Tuskegee Experiment, 1932 to 1972. The Tuskegee Experiment was a long-term study conducted by the United States Public Health Service and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, to investigate the untreated progression of syphilis in African American men. The study involved 600 men, of whom 399 had syphilis and 201 did not have the disease. Participants were recruited without their informed consent and were deceived about the purpose and nature of the study. Infected men with syphilis did not receive proper treatment even after penicillin became the standard treatment for the disease in the 1940s. The experiment continued until 1972, when its unethical nature was exposed by the media, generating public outrage and leading to changes. 2 Nazi experiments during the Holocaust, 1940 to 1945. During World War II, the Nazis conducted a series of medical and scientific experiments on concentration camp prisoners. These experiments were often inhumane, cruel, and deadly, conducted without consent or concern for the subject's well-being. Hypothermia experiments, conducted at the Dachau concentration camp. These experiments involved submerging prisoners in ice-cold water or exposing them to sub-zero temperatures for extended periods to study the effects of hypothermia and develop treatments for German pilots facing such conditions. Altitude experiments, also conducted at Dachau, the Nazis placed prisoners in low-pressure chambers to simulate high-altitude conditions and study the effects on the human body. Many prisoners died due to decompression and lack of oxygen. Twin experiments, conducted at the Auschwitz concentration camp by Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death. These experiments involved performing invasive and sometimes fatal medical procedures on twins to study genetics and heredity. Many twins were subjected to painful surgeries, injections, and other procedures without anesthesia or any concern for their well-being. 3 MKUltra Project, 1953 to 1973. The MKUltra project was a secret CIA program aimed at developing mind control and psychological manipulation techniques. It included experiments with drugs, mainly LSD, hypnosis, physical and psychological abuse, and sensory deprivation. Participants often did not know they were being subjected to these experiments, and many suffered lasting physical and psychological damage. 4 Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychological experiment conducted by Philip Zimbardo, in which college students were randomly assigned as prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment. The aim was to study the effects of the environment and power on social interactions. The experiment quickly spiraled out of control, with the guards abusing their power and inflicting psychological abuse on the prisoners. The study was terminated early due to ethical concerns. Monster Experiment, 1939. The Monster Experiment was conducted by speech pathologist Dr. Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa. The study involved orphan children and aimed to investigate the hypothesis that stuttering was a learned behavior. Half of the children were subjected to constant criticism and negative feedback about their speech, while the other half received positive feedback. The experiment had lasting psychological consequences for some of the children, damaging their self-esteem and speech development. Human Radiation Experiments, 1944 to 1974. During and after World War II, a series of radiation experiments were conducted on humans in the United States. Many of these experiments involved injecting radioactive materials into people without their consent or knowledge. The experiments were conducted to study the effects of radiation on the human body and develop treatments for radiation-related diseases. 7 mg Study on Obedience to Authority, 1961. Psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a study on obedience to authority at Yale University. Participants were instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner, who was actually an actor, whenever they made a mistake in a memory test. The shocks increased in intensity with each mistake, and participants were encouraged to continue administering the shocks, even if they expressed concern or wanted to stop. The study revealed the extent to which people were willing to obey authorities, even when it meant causing suffering. Before we continue with the video, we are trying to reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers on our channel. So, if you are not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button now and be part of this achievement. And now, back to the video. 8 Plutonium injections, 1945 to 1947. In this experiment, 18 people, including hospital patients and prisoners, were given plutonium injections without their consent. The goal was to study the distribution and accumulation of plutonium in the human body and understand the risks associated with exposure to this radioactive element. Many of the participants suffered adverse health effects due to the exposure. 9 Radioactive cloud tests, 1945 to 1962. During the nuclear tests conducted by the United States at Bikini Atoll and Unethical Atoll and the Nevada test site, people living in nearby areas were exposed to radiation from radioactive clouds. It is estimated that thousands of people were affected by these tests, experiencing health effects ranging from acute illnesses to cancers and genetic problems in future generations. Therapeutic radiation exposure, 1940 to 1970. Total body irradiation, TBI, therapy was used to treat patients with cancer and other diseases, often without their full knowledge of the risks involved. In some cases, TBI was applied in excessively high doses, resulting in health damage, including severe side effects and even death. 7 Radioactive iodine experiments, 1940 to 1960. In these experiments, patients, including children, were given doses of radioactive iodine-131 to study thyroid function and iodine metabolism. Some pregnant women were also given doses of radioactive iodine, resulting in adverse health effects for them and their children. The Trinity atomic bomb experiment was the first test of a nuclear weapon in history. It took place on July 16, 1945, at the Trinity test site near Alamogordo, New Mexico, in the United States. The test was conducted as part of the Manhattan Project, a secret research and development effort aimed at developing nuclear weapons during World War II. Test code: the test was codenamed Trinity by J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientific director of the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer chose the name inspired by a poem by John Donne, a 17th-century English metaphysical poet. Tested device: the bomb tested at Trinity was called the Gadget. It was a full-scale version of the implosion-type nuclear fission bomb, similar to the Fat Man bomb that was later dropped on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. The device used plutonium-239 as fissile material and had a spherical core, surrounded by conventional explosives that, when detonated, compressed the core and initiated the chain reaction. Test tower: the Gadget was assembled on top of a 100-foot steel tower, so the detonation could be observed from a distance and its effects could be better analyzed. Test results: the Trinity test produced a nuclear explosion equivalent to 20 kilotons of TNT. The blast created a fireball that was visible for miles and left a crater in the desert floor. The explosion generated intense heat, light, and radiation, causing severe burns, injuries, and illnesses to people and animals nearby. Aftermath: the Trinity test marked the beginning of the nuclear age, as it demonstrated the immense destructive power of nuclear weapons. The success of the test led to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ultimately contributing to the end of World War II. However, the long-term health and environmental consequences of nuclear weapons testing and use have been immense, with countless people affected by radiation exposure and other hazards. These are just some examples of experiments that were conducted without the knowledge or consent of the subjects. In many cases, the consequences were severe, and they serve as a stark reminder of the importance of ethical considerations in scientific research. We hope you found this video informative and eye-opening. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos, and click the bell icon to get notified when we post new content.